Do you ever look at a beautifully blended card and think, I could never do that? Well, today I'm going to prove you wrong. I'm sharing the secret to getting these ultra soft, magical blends using alcohol markers, and the best part, it's actually easier than it looks. Stick around to see the sparkling finishing touch that brings this whole fairy scene to life. Hi, I'm Revati, and welcome to my channel. This is where we get creative and have fun with colors. To get started, let's take a quick look at the products that I'll be using today. I'm going to be working with this absolutely gorgeous pixie dust stamp set by Simon Says Stamp, featuring a large floral image, and I'll be pairing it with one of those sweetest little fairies. For my sentiment, I'll be using another stamp set, again by Simon Says Stamp. This is the Celestial Wishes, and I'll be using the sentiment that says, Hope your day is magical, which I felt paired perfectly with my entire design today. To get started, I stamped the large floral image along with my sentiment onto a 4 by 5 1/4 inch panel. I used Memento black ink since I'll be coloring with my Ohuhu alcohol markers. Well, I have been using these markers for over 5 years now, and I honestly have zero complaints. I absolutely love them and would confidently recommend them to any paper crafter, card maker, or honestly anyone who enjoys coloring. For this card, I decided to work with very soft, light pastel tones. Normally, when I'm coloring floral images, I'm naturally drawn to bright, bold pinks. But for today's card, I wanted something more delicate and dreamy. So I pulled out the lighter pink shades from my collection. Now, when you're aiming for a soft look like this, the key isn't how many colors you use, it's all about how you layer them. For the petals, I didn't limit myself to just one pink. Instead, I mixed a few lighter shades, starting with a soft salmon pink and then bringing in pinks that lean slightly towards pale lavender tone. This subtle variation in color helps add depth while still keeping everything light and airy. I began with the salmon pink as my base layer and applying the color evenly across the entire petal. I'm not focusing on individual strokes here, just smooth, consistent coverage. Once that base layer was in place, I went with a second shade of pink and gently pulled the color inward from the tips of the petals. You'll notice I'm using a very light hand for each of those strokes, especially near the edges. These alcohol markers are very juicy, so there's no need to press hard. Let the ink blend naturally and do the work for you. Taking your time and building up the color slowly makes all the difference when you're going in for a soft pastel finish. This process does take a bit of patience, but it's not all that difficult. If you take a moment to look at the flower petals in nature, you'll notice all those beautiful lines and subtle strokes running through them. That's the inspiration I like to keep in mind while I'm coloring. And if you're a beginner, my biggest tip is to simply enjoy playing with the colors rather than worrying about using any of those fancy techniques. Now, after adding the strokes of the darker shades to each of those petals, I went back in with the same color I used for the base layer and lightly applied it all over the petals once more. This step helps blend everything together and really softens the overall look, bringing all the layers together seamlessly. Moving on to the leaves, I'm layering multiple shades of greens, starting with the darkest shade along the edges and gradually working my way towards the lightest shade as I move to the center of each of those leaves. You'll notice that the lightest green that I'm using here is more of a lemon yellow toned green, and that's what helps create the soft glowing highlight while keeping the edges nicely shadowed. This technique is something that I really love, and it's something that I often use when working with watercolors as well, where you lift some of that wet color with a dry brush to create natural highlights. Translating that idea into alcohol markers helps gives the leaf more dimension while still keeping the look soft and organic. I use the same technique to color in the stems as well. You'll notice a subtle variation in color where the depth and intensity create a soft highlight through the center and gentle shadow along the edges. This contrast adds dimension and gives the stems as well as the leaves a much more natural and realistic look. For the flower centers, I began by adding small dots of brown right in the middle and then fill the entire center with very soft, subtle brown, almost like sandy shade. To bring those details to life, I added touches of orange and yellow to the tiny pollen elements that extend from the center of the flower. Well, that completes the main coloring I wanted to focus on. You could absolutely use this floral image on its own as the main focal point of your card, but I decided to take it a step further, and off camera, I colored in a little fairy along with an adorable bee and a dragonfly. I kept the coloring on these elements very simple, using the lighter shades of purples and blues that I had in my stash. Now, before adhering all of these little elements on my card front, I also wanted to add a few delicate trails for the bee and the dragonfly to give the scene a bit more movement and make it look a lot more whimsical. I placed my panel onto my stamp wheel and stamped the little trails from the pixie dust stamp set on either side of the floral image. I made sure to check the placement carefully so that all the elements lined up just right before stamping. Once that was done, I foam mounted the colored panel onto a green top folding card base. I felt this shade of green complemented the natural elements of the card front perfectly, tying everything together beautifully. I added small pieces of foam tape to my fairy, the little bee, and the dragonfly. That tiny lift might seem subtle, but it makes a world of difference in the finished card. It's these little details that bring a sense of magic and life to your project. Suddenly, your elements feels like they're floating right off the page. I love how these small tricks can really make certain parts of your card pop, drawing the eye and adding that extra bit of charm and dimension that turns a simple card into something truly special. Well, this is a fairy tale card, and of course, every fairy needs her little sparkle. I grabbed my Spectrum Noir glitter brush pen and added shimmer to all of those colored images. The petals and the leaves of the big floral image, the fairy's wings and her dress, and even the tiny bee and the dragonfly. The sparkle really brings everything to life and adds that whimsical and magical touch. I absolutely love how sparkly this card turned out. It's this kind of finishing details that I absolutely love and adore in my finished projects. You could definitely take this card a step further by adding ink splatters, sequences, or other embellishments. But I decided to keep it simple and focus on the subtle details, the coloring, and the absolutely gorgeous shine and sparkle on each of those elements. The camera does not do justice to all that shine there, but in person, this card looks absolutely stunning. I also added a few highlights using my white gel pen on the petals, the leaves, and the fairy's wings. I love how these tiny touches of shine make the image pop instantly, giving them extra dimension and bringing the whole scene to life. Just make sure that whenever you're adding your highlights, you add it at the very end after all that glitter and sparkle on your stamped and colored images. And with that, our fairy tale card is complete. I had so much fun bringing this magical scene to life with the soft pastels, delicate layers, and just the right amount of sparkle. A quick question for you. Would you like to see a full real time coloring video of this project? Let me know in the comments below. If you're looking for more beautifully colored projects like this one, be sure to check out this playlist where you will find plenty of inspiration and step by step tutorials. And don't forget, all the supplies that I used for today's video are linked in the description box below. Please note that all of these links are affiliate links, which means that if you shop using one of my links, I'll get a small commission at no cost to you guys. Thank you again for joining me today. Until next time, stay safe. Vellum. It's that gorgeous translucent paper we all buy because it feels so high end, and then it just sits in our drawer because we're terrified the adhesive will show through. So, today we are answering the big question: is vellum actually worth the hype? Well, I'll be sharing three simple but impactful ways to use the translucent papers to take your cards from flat to professional, including my favorite tricks for hiding that pesky glue. I'm Revati, and this is RP underscore Shutterbug. Let's get crafty. I'll be using three vellum sheets from Your Paper Insider box number 14, which is the latest subscription box. We have the Wisteria Purple Vellum, the Natural Clear Vellum, and a beautiful lemon yellow vellum. Now, you must have seen me use vellum in many of my projects, including die cutting delicate leaves and floral elements, creating soft shadow layers for sentiments, or even using it to tone down busy backgrounds. But today, we are taking a step further and trying something new. I'll be experimenting with heat embossing and even running vellum through an embossing folder to achieve a completely different look. I must say, vellum can be a little unpredictable at times, but that's part of the magic. I love how versatile and expressive it turned out to be across all the three cards that we create today. Let's get started with card number one and, well, technique number one, which is simple die cutting. We are going to pair a solid cardstock with die cut vellum, and honestly, this is one of my favorite ways to use vellum because it's easy, stress free, and always looks elegant. For this first project, I'm using the Windswept Leaves die by Simon Stamp, and I'm pairing this with the absolutely gorgeous Wisteria Purple Vellum. I mean, just look at that color. It's soft and subtle, and it adds interest without overpowering the design. The die cutting of vellum is just like die cutting any solid cardstock. I simply created my sandwich and ran it through my die cutting machine, and we are left with these absolutely gorgeous and delicate, airy leaves that are perfect for layering on your card front. Off camera, I also went ahead and die cut the same exact set of leaves from plain white cardstock. I love doing this because it gives me more flexibility when I start arranging everything together. My plan is to create a loose, flowing leaf cluster starting from the top of the card panel and cascading downwards. By layering the white leaves together with the vellum leaves, we'll be creating that beautiful fullness and depth while keeping the overall look very clean and simple. This is also a great way to let your vellum shine without worrying too much about adhesive showing through, since we'll be hiding most of the glue behind the cardstock layers. Since I was already working with the Wisteria Purple Vellum, I decided to keep things soft and cohesive and go with a lighter shade of lavender cardstock from my stash for my card base. It complements the vellum beautifully without competing with it. I'll be honest, this part took a bit of trial and error. I played around quite a bit, moving the leaves around and testing different layouts until the cascading arrangement felt just right. Once I was happy with it, I decided to focus mainly on the larger leaves and using both the white cardstock leaf and the vellum ones to really anchor the design. I did sneak in one of the smaller vellum leaves for a little extra interest, and as far as the rest of the die cuts go, I'll be saving those for maybe decorating the inside of the card or even use them on my envelope. This is one of those little details that makes the whole project feel more intentional and polished without adding any extra work. I also pulled out a purple mirror cardstock strip from again box number 14, which I'll be adding to the top of the card base right where the cascading leaves begin. This little strip along with another purple cardstock strip will really help ground the entire leaf focal point and give the design a nice finished look. But before we start assembling everything, let's take a moment to stamp our sentiment. I placed the entire card panel along with the setup onto my stamp wheel, keeping the layout exactly as is, and decided to turn this into a very elegant thank you card. Now, for that, I chose the sentiment, which is this absolutely gorgeous scripty font that simply says thanks from the Vintage Garden stamp set by Simon Stamp. It's delicate, timeless, and pairs beautifully with the softness of that vellum. Now, to keep the color palette cohesive, I stamped my sentiment using Midnight Violet ink from Altenew. I stamped it twice to really build up the color and get that beautiful crisp impression. Sometimes that second stamping makes all the difference, especially when you're going for a clean and polished finish. Now that our sentiment is in place, we can start assembling all of the components of our card front. I began by securing the panel onto my glass mat, and I'm using those little magnets to hold everything in place. This honestly is my favorite way to keep things from shifting while we are working on our card front. One of the easiest ways I found to perfectly align strips every single time is to line the cardstock with the grid lines on the glass mat and holding the panel down with a magnet, and then I bring in my T-square roller. I then apply a thin line of glue right along the edge of the ruler, and that gives me a clean, straight guide for placing my strips. First, I'm adding that thicker purple mirror cardstock strip, followed by a thinner strip in a slightly darker shade of purple. These two layers add just enough contrast and shine without overpowering the design. Once those are in place, we can start adhering our die cut leaves. Adding glue to the white cardstock leaves is very straightforward, but when it comes to the translucent vellum leaves, you do want to slow down a bit. You really don't want any of that adhesive showing through that beautiful focal point. I apply the tiniest dots of glue in very strategic points along the leaf, mostly where it overlaps with the white cardstock or tucks behind another element. This way, the glue stays hidden and the entire focal point looks clean, polished, and professionally finished. It's a small detail, but it makes a big difference. You can also use small glue dots on your vellum die cuts if that's what you prefer, but for me, I really like using tiny drops of liquid glue. It gives me more control and I find it works best for this kind of layering. Now that everything is assembled on our card front, we can go ahead and mount this panel onto our card base. I used foam tape to pop it up slightly, which adds just a bit of dimension and helps separate the layers nicely. Now, before calling this card finished, I couldn't resist adding a few positively dazzling gems to embellish the card front. They add the perfect touch of sparkle without taking away from the vellum or the clean and simple design. And with that, card number one is complete. It is super soft, elegant, and a beautiful way to let your vellum shine. Now, we'll move on to technique number two, which is heat embossing on vellum. And this was actually my very first time trying this technique, and I have to say I'm so happy with how this turned out. For this card, I'm using the clear vellum. This is the kind of vellum that I actually reach out for when I want to tone down a busy background or create a soft shadow layer behind die cut sentiments. But heat embossing on vellum, that just sounded so much fun, and I had to give it a try. Sticking with the floral theme, I chose this beautiful floral arrangement from the Wildflower Cuttings stamp set by Simon's Stamp. The delicate lines of this image work so well on that translucent vellum. I wanted to create a frame for my card front, so I trimmed down the vellum and decided to frame it using a white A2 frame, which I had already die cut using the A2 frame style, also by Simon's Stamp. I love how a simple white frame really helps define the vellum and gives it a clean, polished look. Using my scissors, I cut a vellum panel that felt just right for that floral image, big enough to let the design breathe, but still soft and airy. This technique feels so super elegant, a little unexpected, and honestly, way less intimidating than I thought it would be. I placed the vellum panel into my stamp wheel along with the white frame so that I could get the placement of both the floral image and the sentiment exactly where I wanted them on the vellum. Now, this frame itself is large enough to hold any of those floral images from the stamp set, and honestly, I think just about every one of them would look absolutely stunning framed this way. It's a really simple setup, but taking a moment to test the placement makes a big difference, especially when you're working on vellum and want everything to feel balanced and intentional. Keeping the soft floral image and the translucent vellum background in mind, I decided to turn this into a get well soon card. For that, I stamped the sentiment "I hope you're feeling better" from the Wildflower Cutting stamp set. To make sure everything is perfectly aligned, I used my grid transparency sheet to position the sentiment, checking that it would sit nicely and fit beautifully within the white frame. Now, just like I would do with any other heat embossing project, I first ran my anti-static powder tool over the vellum panel before stamping. Now, since I had planned to use white embossing powder, I stamped both the floral image and the sentiment using white pigment ink. Now, once the stamping was done, I sprinkled the white embossing powder over the images and melted it with my heat gun. Now, vellum is a much thinner sheet than your regular cardstock, so this is one of those moments where you want to slow down a bit and be extra mindful, especially with a full image like this floral arrangement. I made sure not to keep the heat gun focused on one spot for too long. Instead, I kept it moving across the panel, which really helps minimize any kind of warping. Taking your time here makes all the difference, and the end result is so soft, elegant, and worth the extra effort. If you notice your vellum panel has warped, don't worry, just let the embossing powder cool down completely and then place the panel under something heavy, like a pile of books or cutting plates. I do the same thing with regular cardstock that warps after heat embossing, and it works like a charm. Take a closer look at this absolutely gorgeous heat embossed image. Isn't it stunning? The white embossing really pops and it looks so delicate and elegant at the same time. Now, thinking about the colors for the card base, on our first project, I paired white with soft purple and lavender. So, for this card, I wanted a bit more contrast. So, I went with a darker shade of purple for the base. It pairs beautifully with that white frame and the white embossed image on our clear vellum, giving the whole card a really polished and cohesive look. To add a little more depth and really make the vellum piece stand out, I decided to stack my frames. I cut the same frame 3 times from white cardstock and layered them together to give that extra dimension and structure to our card front. Once the stack was ready, I carefully layered it onto our embossed vellum using tiny drops of liquid glue. You want to be really gentle here, just small amounts in strategic spots, because we don't want any of that glue oozing out from this delicate frame and spoiling the look of our vellum framed piece. Now, don't worry about the edges of the vellum here right now. We will trim everything off later in the video so it looks perfectly clean. For the moment, I'm holding the vellum and the stacked frame in place with those trusty heavy magnets while we move on to working on our card background. This keeps everything perfectly aligned and makes the next step so much more easier. To add a little texture to my purple background, I decided to stamp the same floral image that's on our vellum frame, but just on the diagonally opposite corners of the panel. I used a lighter shade of purple for this, basically tone on tone stamping. The idea here isn't to make the flowers stand out, but just to give the background a subtle pop of texture. This way, the background feels interesting and layered, but it doesn't compete with our main focal point, which is that beautiful embossed vellum frame. It's all about letting the delicate image really shine while keeping the card elegant and cohesive. Next, I trimmed off the excess vellum that was sticking out from the frame using my scissors. And just like that, we have our beautiful, delicate framed piece ready to be layered onto our stamped background. But before I adhere this to the panel, I decided to add some of that same positively dazzling gems directly onto the vellum first. I know adding sequences or gems usually comes at the very end, but I'm doing it ahead of time here. Why? Because these little accents give me perfect spots to hide my glue, making it much easier to keep the vellum look clean and polished while I attach it to our card. It's a simple trick that makes the assembly process so much more smoother and adds just the right touch of sparkle to our card front. Now that our gems are in place, it's time to add liquid glue to the frame. I am also focusing on the tiny spots behind the gems. This way the glue stays hidden and we don't see any sticky marks on the vellum. Once those spots are glued, we can carefully position the framed vellum piece onto our stamped background. Doing it this way ensures that a frame fits snugly and securely while keeping the delicate look of the embossed image intact. This is a small step, but it makes a huge difference in how polished the finished card looks. I will hold everything in place using those magnets again and make sure that everything is dry before I adhere this entire card front onto my card base. Here's a closer look at our beautiful card panel. I just love how the white embossing powder pops against the clear vellum. It really makes the floral image stand out. The white frame complements that embossing perfectly, giving the piece a really polished and finished look. And don't forget to notice that lightly stamped floral images on the background. They add just the right amount of texture without ever overpowering our framed centerpiece, keeping the focus where it belongs. I then went ahead and mounted this panel onto a top folding card base using some foam tape for that extra dimension. And I absolutely love how this card turned out. The sparkle on that is really stunning. It's all those little layered details that really take a clean and simple card to the next level. And now we're on to card number 3, which I have to admit felt a little intimidating at first. For this one, we are working with an embossing folder and our lemon yellow vellum. I actually used this vellum sheet in my previous project where I die cut it to create little leaf arrangements behind a floral deco piece. But this time we are doing something completely different. We are pairing the translucent lemon yellow vellum with one of my absolute favorite 3D embossing folders called Blossom Swag. I just love the texture and the intricate detail this folder creates. Usually, when I emboss regular cardstock, I like to lightly mist it first, but I decided not to mist the vellum this time. I ran the sandwich through my die cutting machine, and when I pulled it out, I did notice some tears and cracking on the surface. At first, I wasn't sure how I felt about those imperfections, but I decided to go with the flow, and I'm so glad I did. Those little tears actually give the piece a beautiful vintagey look, adding to the character and charm of our finished card. I decided to pair this embossed vellum with craft cardstock, which really adds to that vintage feel of the finished card. I had originally cut the vellum panel to be slightly longer than the card base, so I added a score line at the top and attached it to the back of the craft cardstock to create a flap. I love this little detail because it adds dimension and movement to our card. I have to admit, this technique felt really unplanned while I was making it, but I decided to trust the process and go with the flow, and honestly, I'm so pleasantly surprised by how it turned out. The textures, the colors, the vintage vibe all came together in a way that feels effortless, even though it started out a little intimidating. At this stage, I really wasn't sure how to continue. I kept wondering, should I add a sentiment strip or maybe a die cut sentiment? I was still figuring out what direction to take this design. Then I had an idea, why not combine some of the techniques from the previous cards and bring them into this one? Just like we added the floral images on the purple background panel in card number 2, I decided to stamp the same floral image here on the craft cardstock as well. I used latte ink, which is the lightest brown in my stash, for a soft, subtle effect. I stamped the floral image on diagonally opposite corners, giving the background just enough interest while keeping the focus on the embossed vellum flap. It's a simple detail, but I love how it ties the card together and adds texture and dimension without overwhelming the design. Now, for the sentiment on our main vellum flap, instead of going with the sentiment strip, I decided to stamp directly onto the vellum. I chose a sentiment that says, thinking of you today and always, and added a little butterfly in the open space, nestled perfectly between the beautiful embossed details of the vellum. Just like we did on card number 2, I heat embossed both the sentiment and the butterfly, but this time I used gold embossing powder. And wow, this is really where the vintage vibe of the card came to life. With the craft cardstock in the background, the delicate embossed texture from the folder, the gold embossed sentiment, and even the little tear on that embossed vellum flap, the card comes together with a look that's vintage, rustic, and yet elegant all in one. This is one of those cards that feels like it found its own style as I worked, and I couldn't be happier with the way it turned out. Here's a closer look at that gold embossing on the lemon yellow vellum. Isn't it absolutely stunning? Honestly, the camera doesn't even do justice to it. In person, that shine and shimmer really catches the light and looks gorgeous. To finish things off, I added a few positively dazzling gems on either side of the sentiment, and then I layered the entire assembly onto a white top folding card base. And just like that, we can call this card done. This card is such a beautiful, vintage, rustic, and elegant vibe, and I love how all the techniques we explored in the previous cards came together in a completely new way here. This is definitely one of those designs I'll need to keep experimenting with, especially figuring out the perfect sandwich for my die cutting machine when working with vellum. If you've ever used vellum with 3D embossing folder, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and let me know what you do differently to prevent the cracking or tearing. I'm always looking for tips and it's so fun to learn from you all. So here are the three cards that we created today. We explored die cutting with vellum to create beautiful focal points, which is a technique I quite often use. We tried heat embossing on delicate translucent sheets, giving those absolutely stunning details, and even ran vellum through 3D embossing folders for some extra texture and dimension, a technique that I definitely will be experimenting a lot more. I'd love to hear from you which technique was your favorite. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I can't wait to read them all. I also wanted to take this moment to share some of my previous vellum projects with you guys. You can use vellum in so many fun and creative ways in backgrounds to add a soft layered look behind a framed piece, or as die cuts to fill a beautiful wreath. It works beautifully as a base for your focal point, or even used to tone down a busy background like the stenciled background here. Now, one of my favorite tricks to using vellum is to use it as a belly band on your card front. Not only does it soften that busy background, but it also gives a perfect place to add your sentiment, turning your sentiment into the main focal point of the card. Now, vellum is just so versatile. It is a translucent sheet with endless possibilities, and it's always fun to experiment with it in new ways. I hope you enjoyed watching today's video and feel inspired to create your own masterpieces using vellum, a product that's definitely worth having in your crafty stash. I will leave links in the description box below to all the supplies that I used to create the cards in this video, along with some of my other favorites that I think you'll love too. Please know that all of these links are affiliate links, so if you shop using one of my links, I'll get a small commission at no cost to you guys. And if you want even more fun card making tips and tricks, be sure to check out this playlist. You'll find lots of inspiration and techniques to try in your own projects. Thank you again for joining me today. Until next time, stay safe. If you think a flat envelope means a boring card, well, think again. Today I'm setting sail with a brand new cat scrappiness pirate release to create an eye-catching 3D pop-up scene that literally jumps out of the mailbox. I'll also be sharing a secret for layering those wood grain waves so they pop beautifully without ever snagging. Hi, I'm Revati and welcome to RP_Shutterbug where we craft, color, and have a whole lot of fun. Let's dive right in. This new release is packed with so many cute and adorable stamps paired with coordinating dies, a super versatile pack of pattern papers, and a fun set of fun filled sentiments that instantly make your cards more playful. Now, before jumping into the construction of the card, I went ahead and did a little prep work off camera. I stamped a few of those images and colored them using my alcohol markers. Since our focus here today is really building up the pop up mechanism, I wanted to get all of the coloring out of the way so we can concentrate more on the interactive elements. Now, let's move on to creating the pop up feature. For this card, I'll be using the Cat Scrappiness 3D pop up box die. And well, I have to say, if you love interactive cards or display style cards, this is truly a game changer. The base die comes with four essential dies, including the main frame and three tier pieces that create the depth inside the box. Cat Scrappiness also offers several add on sets that allow you to customize the look of those tiers with different shapes. There's a add on grass die, which I used for this sample piece right here, which will give you that beautiful grass effect on your finished projects. They also have waves and stitched hill add-on dies that give you more creative flexibility to create projects depending on the background or on the scene that you wish to create. Well, for today's card, I'll be using the stitched hill add-on to build out our scene. For the main frame as well as for the three stitched hill tiers, I'll be pulling out papers from the new Pirate Quokka paper pad, which ties in perfectly with the theme and adds instant interest to the pop-up design. The base layer or the main frame measures 6 and 3/4 inches in length, while the pattern paper from the paper pad is only 6 inches long. This means that there'll be a small gap that we left uncovered if we use the pattern paper on its own. So to avoid that, what I like to do is to make sure that the entire background of the main frame is covered in the pattern paper. And then I will cut the main frame again with white cardstock. Then I layer the pattern paper on top of it. This layer does two things. It gives me a seamless pattern background inside the pop-up box, and it also adds extra stability to the entire mechanism. Adhering the pattern paper to the white cardstock helps reinforce the structure of the pop-up mechanism, which is especially helpful for interactive cards like these. Once that's done, I trimmed off both the edges from the or both the flaps from the pattern paper and adhered it flat onto my card base using liquid glue, making sure everything lines up perfectly and stays secure. To create my flaps or tears, I decided to use the wood grain pattern paper from the paper pad. I love this choice instantly because it gives a look and feel of a wooden ship deck, which works perfectly with the pirate theme, while still allowing the waves and the other elements in the background to shine. Once I had my paper selected, I went ahead and I cut all the three tier pieces. Now, if you take a closer look at these wood grain tiers, you will notice there are small tabs or flaps on each end of these pieces. These little tabs are very important because this is exactly where we'll be adding our adhesive to build a pop-up structure. Now I will first fold the flaps, and well, when it comes to interactive card designs like this one, I personally prefer using strong double-sided tape rather than liquid glue. Double-sided tape gives me much more precision and control during the assembly, and I don't have to worry about any excess adhesive squeezing out. With pop-up cards, even a small amount of glue in the wrong spot can cause the mechanism to stick or stop opening properly. So using tape helps ensure that everything pops up and folds flat smoothly every single time. To assemble and place the tiers, I always like to start with the smallest piece first. I begin by removing the backing of the double-sided tape on one side of the tier. Then I carefully adhere it along the edge of the white flap on my main frame. Next, I move on to the middle layer. This one gets attached right next to the shorter flap on the main frame, making sure it sits neatly and lines properly. Taking your time here really helps the pop-up mechanism work smoothly. One more important thing to keep in mind is not to adhere all of these layers in a straight line. Staggering the placement of the tiers is what creates the depth and allows the pop-up to open and close correctly. Finally, for the third and the largest layer, I adhered it right along the fold of the main frame. This placement gives the scene its full dimension and ensures that all the layers collapse flat when the card is closed and pop open beautifully when it's taken out of the envelope. Next, I'm going to remove the adhesive backing from all the remaining flaps on each of those tiers on the other side. Now, once those backings are off, I carefully lay the entire pop-up assembly flat on my work surface. I like to do this slowly and deliberately so that nothing shifts out of place. Before attaching anything permanently, I take a moment to double check that all the tiers are perfectly aligned. I will also score the other side of the flap just to make sure that everything lines up perfectly. I make sure they are sitting in a straight line, evenly spaced, and not twisted or angled in any way. This step is really important because proper alignment ensures that the pop up box will fold completely flat when closed and open smoothly without catching onto anything. Now, once I'm happy with the placement, I gently close the flap of the mainframe over the tiers, pressing down firmly along the edges to secure everything in place. I like to run my fingers along the folds to reinforce them and make sure that the adhesive has a good strong hold. And with that, our 3D pop-up box frame is officially finished. The interactive structure is now fully assembled and ready to go. From here, all that's left to do is the fun part, which is adding our pre-colored images, building out the scene, and decorating the pop-up box however we like to bring this card to life. Just like we added extra stability to the main frame by layering the pattern paper onto the white cardstock base, I follow the same approach with my focal point images as well. Now, since these images are attached to moving parts of the pop-up mechanism, I want them to be strong and secure without adding any unnecessary bulk. I adhered my focal point images using liquid glue applying it along the very edges. This gives me a little bit of wiggle room for positioning while still creating a strong bond once it dries. Now, to add even more stability, I die cut extra pieces of those pirate images from plain white cardstock and layered it behind the colored one. I then adhered these stacked images onto the flaps, making sure they sit firmly in place and don't wobble as the card opens and closes. I also want to mention that for any interactive card design that I create, I always recommend using heavyweight cardstock, especially for the main frame and for the focal point images that pop out of the mechanism. That added thickness really helps the card hold its shape and stand up to repeated opening and closing. To complete the scene, I added the pirate, his little treasure box filled with jewelry, and Mr. Krabby to each of those tiers using liquid glue. I used my reverse tweezers to hold each of those images in place while the adhesive set. How fun and easy is this box card to create? You could absolutely add more images and really build out the scene even further, but I decided to keep mine just as is, with one little pirate and Mr. Krabby keeping him company. I was really in mood for something clean and simple, but still wanted that interactive element to be the star of the card. That's exactly why I chose not to add any more stamped images and keep the design more to the minimal. For my sentiment, I went with a fun, playful phrase that reads, "You are a treasure," from the Pirate Sentiment stamp set. To give it a bit more personality and make it feel like as if the pirate is actually speaking to us, I wanted to create a speech bubble style look. So I stamped the sentiment onto a piece of white cardstock and then die cut it using the stitched speech bubble craft die, again by Cat Scrappiness, which adds just the right amount of detail while still keeping everything cohesive and clean. I strategically positioned the speech bubble right next to my pirate and adhered it using liquid glue. Now, placing it close to the focal point image helps tie the scene together and makes it look like he's really speaking the sentiment. Now, one important thing to keep in mind when it comes to making box cards is to pay close attention to the height of all your elements, whether it's your stamped images, embellishments, or sentiments. Everything needs to fit neatly under the main frame. If any of those pieces extend above the top of the frame, the card won't fold and fit into your normal A2 size envelope, and you might end up needing a larger envelope. The great thing about this particular design is that it fits perfectly into a standard A2 size envelope. And since I kept all the elements simple and did not add a lot of bulk, the card is lightweight and easy to mail out. Standard postage will be more than enough to send out this interactive pop up card to someone special, making it both fun to create and practical to share. And there you have it, a fun interactive box card that really pops and brings your scene to life. I absolutely love how versatile and playful this design is, and the brand new Cat Scrappiness Pirate release made it so easy to create this little adventure. From pattern papers and adorable stamps to coordinating dies and fun sentiments, there's so much you can do with this set. If you're a fan of interactive cards or just love seeing pop up magic in action, don't forget to check out my interactive cards playlist, where you'll find plenty of tutorials, tips and tricks, and inspirations to help you create more cards that move, pop, and wow your recipient. I will be sure to link all the supplies that I used to create this card in the description down below. Please note that all of these links are affiliate links, which means that if you shop using one of my links, I'll get a small commission at no cost to you guys. Thank you again for joining me today. Until next time, stay safe. Have you ever made a pop up card that looks impressive but is actually super easy? Because today I'm showing you a DIY pop up bridge card that comes together with just a few basic supplies, and chances are you already have everything you need in your stash. Now, this card design is one of my absolute favorites because it's quick, beginner friendly, and incredibly versatile. You can dress it up or keep it simple. Use dies, stamps, stencils, or even leftover scraps. No fancy tools required. As we work through this card, I'll show you how the structure comes together step by step, along with a few easy tips to make sure your pop up folds perfectly every time. And if pop up card sounds intimidating, don't worry, this one is not. Once you make it once, you'll want to recreate it for birthdays, holidays, and pretty much every occasion. So grab your cardstocks, Pull your favorite supplies and craft along with me, and be sure to watch till the very end because I'll be sharing a fun idea for customizing this bridge using different elements from your stash. Hello, friends, I'm Revati, and welcome back to my crafty space. I'm going to start by building the base for our pop up bridge card, and this is where the structure of the card really comes together. For my card base, I'm using a piece of cardstock that measures 10 3/4 inches by 5.5 inches. I would definitely recommend using a heavyweight cardstock for this project since this card has a pop up element. A sturdier cardstock will help the mechanism hold its shape really well. It also makes a big difference if you plan to display this card standing up because it keeps everything nice and stable. Next, we will create the pop-up mechanism by adding a few score lines. Now, these score lines are very important as they allow the card to fold and pop up correctly. On both sides of the card bases, I'm going to score at 1 1/4 inch, 2 1/4 inch, and 3 1/4 inch. So I have three score lines on either side of this card base. Once the score lines are in place, the folds will naturally form the bridge structure, making it easy to pop up and stand out when the card is opened. Take your time with this step and make sure that your measurements are accurate. It really helps the finished card look clean and professional. I will simply turn around the cardstock and create the score lines again on the other side of the panel, exactly like I did on the first side. So again, I'm scoring at 1 1/4 inch, 2 1/4 inch, and 3 1/4 inch. So we have basically six score lines on this entire panel. Now that our score lines are in place, I'm going to start folding along each of those score lines. I like to go back and forth, creating a zigzag or Arcadian fold on both sides of the cardstock. This step really helps bring the pop-up mechanism to life. Now take your time here and make sure each fold is nice and crisp. You can either use a bone folder or just your fingers, whatever you're comfortable with. I prefer using my bone folder. Now once it's done, you'll see the zigzag pattern. It's more like maybe a W or a M shape pattern you get. Now once both sides are folded into that zigzag shape, this is what you end up with. You already see how the structure starts to form with that pop-up sections on each of those sides. This is the base of our bridge, and from here, the rest of the card will come together easily. Well, what if I told you that the bridge pop-up card is already complete? Well, the structure is done, and now comes the really fun part. All we have to do is decorate. At this stage, you can start bringing your card to life using beautiful pattern papers, add some fun focal point die cuts, add an embossed or stenciled background, and finish it off with a beautiful sentiment of your choice. And this is exactly why I mentioned at the very beginning that this is one of the easiest and quickest interactive cards that you can create. Once the base is ready, the possibilities are endless. You can easily change up the look by switching out the papers, stamps, or dies and use or even use the same design for any occasion. Now, this is one of the those cards that not only makes the recipient smile when they open it, but also a joy to create as a card maker. It's simple, versatile, and so satisfying to put together, and that's why it's one of my absolute favorite designs. To decorate the card, I decided to pull out one of the gorgeous pattern papers from Your Paper Insider box number 14. I absolutely love the floral design on this paper. It is such a soft, subtle hint of pink paired with those delicate floral details that add so much elegance without overpowering our card. Now, this is a very lightweight paper and it's called Dusty Rose Yuzenshi Shogami paper. Well, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. The texture and the softness of this paper make it perfect for layering and adding visual interest to our pop-up design. Now I have cut three panels from this paper. The larger one measures 4 by 5 1/4 inches. Since once you assemble this pop-up card, it will be a standard A2 size card. And this panel will serve as the background for our pop-up window. The two thinner strips measure 1 by 5 1/4 inches, and these will be adhered to the flaps of our bridge to tie everything together. Now, because this paper is so lightweight, I didn't want to use any of that liquid glue as it could warp the paper or show through the finished card. Instead, I'm using double-sided tape to adhere all of these panels securely onto the card base, keeping everything neat, clean, and flat. Now, if you're someone who really doesn't enjoy using pattern paper on your card backgrounds, you can absolutely switch things up here. An embossed panel or even a stenciled background would work beautifully with this design as well. Now you'll also notice that I cut all the three of these panels slightly smaller than the actual card base. I like leaving a thin white border around the edges. It adds a nice clean frame and gives the card a more polished and professional look. For me, that little bit of white space really helps the design breathe. Cutting the panels to the exact same size as the background or the flaps would work too, but I personally love how the subtle border elevates the overall design and look of the finished card. With that, our pop-up base is complete. Now we need something to connect both of these flaps together and create the bridge. This is what allows the center panel to pop up beautifully when the card is opened and, well, still fold flat so it fits perfectly inside an envelope. Now, traditionally, you could use a simple strip of cardstock to form the bridge, and that works great. But today, I'm going to show you a fun alternative technique that adds a little extra charm and personality to your card. Instead of a plain strip, I'll be using die cuts to connect both our flaps. Not only do they hold the structure together, but they also become a part of the design, turning the bridge into a decorative floral focal point rather than just a functional element. Now, I chose some of these absolutely gorgeous floral dies by Simon's Stamp. I had two in mind, but I ended up using just that one. I'm using the Elegant Blossoms branch dies by Simon's Stamp, which include these beautiful branch details along with two delicate floral elements. I went ahead and I cut all of these pieces using heavyweight white cardstock. And well, this is a single piece die, so I personally like to cut everything together from white cardstock and then add color later. That said, you could absolutely switch this up and use any colored cardstocks you like, whatever works best for your project. Now, to make coloring easier, I placed all of the die cut pieces on my ultra sticky mat so nothing moves around. For the floral petals, I used a very soft mix of peach and pink tones, which I felt tied in beautifully with our subtle pink in the background paper. For the stems and the leaves, I combined greens and browns to keep everything looking natural and balanced. I'm using my little tiny mini ink blending brushes to get that detailed coloring on just the centers of the floral petals. I'm not coloring the entire petals, just from the center, adding flickering motions towards the outside of the petals. I did the same with my leaves as well. On the surface of the leaves, I have a lighter shade of green, and on the base of each of those leaves, I have the darker shade of green. And for the stem, I used two shades of browns. As always, I will have all the colors and supplies I used linked in the description box below in case you'd like to recreate this same exact look. Next, I use tiny drops of liquid glue to start assembling my flowers. Now, because the stem is so thin and delicate, I decided to layer it up using two additional pieces of stems that I die cut using heavyweight white cardstock. This gives the stem more stability and helps it hold its shape when the card is open. Now, for now, I'm not adhering any of the flowers to the stem. I want to make sure everything lines up perfectly. I place the stems back into the pop-up card, and you'll notice I have my grid transparency sheet laid on top. This really is helpful because it allows me to check the alignment and prevents any glue from accidentally getting on the card itself. Once I'm happy with the placement of both the stems and the flowers, I will carefully glue the flowers at strategic positions on my stem. This ensures that when the bridge opens, everything is perfectly aligned on the flaps and sits beautifully within the pop-up structure. Once my blossoms are ready, the next step is to adhere the parts of the floral elements that overlap with the flap to our bridge. Now, this is the part that really brings the pop up to life, making the flowers appear as though they are floating across the card. Now you could simply glue the flowers directly onto the flaps and that would work just fine. But if your card needs a little extra support, especially for delicate elements like these thin stems, you can add a thin strip of acetate behind your flowers. Now, I chose to do this, placing a narrow acetate strip behind my flowers. It's practically invisible, but it gives the flaps a little more structure and keeps everything stable when the card is opened and closed. Now, this step is optional, so feel free to skip this if your design feels sturdy enough on its own. I applied small amounts of liquid glue along the edges of the acetate and carefully tucked it behind the flap opening. Be sure that the acetate sits on the flap itself and not on the innermost zigzag layer of the pop up structure. That way, it won't interfere with the folds or the pop up action. Now, once the acetate was in place, I added tiny drops of glue to the edges of the flowers as well that overlap with our flaps. This ensures that the floral elements stay perfectly aligned while giving the card a professional look. Now, usually when I'm working with any kind of plastic or acetate material, I prefer using double-sided glue. But in this case, I'm using liquid glue because it definitely gives me some wiggle room to make sure that my acetate is in place and it's exactly where I want it to be. You'll see me fiddling a bit with the flowers. I'm sure there's a better way to do it, but this is what works best for me. Finally, to make sure everything stays in place while the glue dries, I placed a few magnets over my flowers. Now, this is a little hack that works beautifully for delicate elements. It holds the pieces firmly without leaving any marks or flattening the pop up. Once the glue dries, the flowers will stay perfectly aligned to the flap and the bridge pops up beautifully every time. While I let the glue on the flowers dry, I moved on to a little fun embellishment, which is this beautiful dragonfly. Now, this is the World Dragonfly die set by Simon Stamp, and I cut it using Wisteria Purple Vellum, which was part of the new box number 14, and white glitter cardstock, which is from one of the previous releases by Your Paper Insider. Now, this combination gives the dragonfly a very soft, delicate shimmer while still adding a little sparkle to our card. To attach it, I layered the dragonfly on top of the floral element. I tucked one set of the wings under the leaves and added tiny drops of glue. This not only holds the wings securely in place but also gives support to the very delicate vellum wings so they don't bend or tear. This little dragonfly adds a playful, whimsical touch to our bridge card and complements the flowers beautifully while still keeping the pop up structure functional and sturdy. I just love how slowly and effortlessly this card is coming together. We have our beautiful floral background, a fun focal point with the layered flowers, and a delicate little dragonfly adding just the right whimsical touch. I'm really in love with the colors in the set. The soft pink, peaches, greens, and purples all complement each other so beautifully. One of my favorite features about this design is that even though it looks intricate and delicate, this card is actually made flat and will fit into your standard A2 size envelope and still pop up perfectly when you open it. Now, all that's left is to add our sentiment. You could definitely use a die cut sentiment, but I chose to stamp one of my absolutely favorite sentiments on a strip of white cardstock and adhere it on both the flaps. And just like that, our card front is complete. Next, we need a little space to write a personal message. To do that, I created a small note card that fits neatly on the back of the card. I secured it in place using double sided tape so it won't move around. To make the design cohesive with the rest of the card, I decorated the front of the note card with the same pattern paper that we used for the main card front. I cut it to fit perfectly, leaving a thin white border around all four edges. This ties the note card in with the rest of the design and keeps the look polished and professional. And just like that, our pop-up bridge card is complete. I absolutely love how this one turned out. The soft floral background, the layered flowers, the delicate dragonfly, and of course the sentiment, everything comes together so beautifully. This card was not only easy and quick to make, but it is so functional. It folds flat to fit into a standard A2 size envelope, and when it's opened, it pops up to be displayed perfectly. It's a design that's as fun for the recipient as it was for me to create. Now, if you enjoyed this tutorial, please don't forget to check out the playlist of my other interactive card tutorials for more inspirations. And of course, all the supplies that I used to create this project will be linked down in the description box below. Please note that all of these links are affiliate links, which means that if you shop using one of my links, I'll get a small commission at no cost to you guys. Thank you so much for crafting along with me today. I hope this card inspires you to pull out your supplies and create something magical too. Thank you again for joining me today. Until next time, stay safe. The Simon's Stamp February card kit is finally here, and today we are doing more than just unboxing. Instead of simply taking a look at what's inside, I'm going to show you how to turn this one kit into a total mass production powerhouse. If you love getting the most out of your supplies, this one's definitely for you. Yes, we are unboxing the kit, but since it arrived a little later than usual, we are switching things up. Rather than just a haul, I'll be putting these products to work right away. Make sure you stick around until the very end because I'll be creating not one but two cards to show you how to design quick, repeatable layouts using some of my favorite color combinations. Hi everyone, I'm Revati and welcome to my channel. Let's dive right in. If you've been following me for a while, you already know how much I love the Simon's Stamp card kits. Now, what I really appreciate is how thoughtfully curated they are. Everything coordinates beautifully, and while some elements might feel seasonal, most of the products can truly be used all around the year and even work no matter where you are in the world. Now, that kind of versatility is something I absolutely love having in my stash. Now, as I open the box, the first thing I see here is a super handy mesh zipper bag. Now, I already have a few of these in a variety of different colors, but didn't have the red one yet. So I'm really excited about this. They are perfect for storing leftover kit pieces or organizing supplies for your project on the go, and well, it will fit all the contents of this kit as well. Now I'm going to take out everything out of the box, walk you through each item, and share a few quick thoughts on how I plan to use them. Well, let's take a closer look. Well, this entire kit is currently sold out, but all of the products that are included in the kit can be bought separately. I will have links to everything in the description box below. Now, before we jump back into the kit, I have to mention that I do have a coupon code included in the kit just in case you'd like to grab anything. Use the code We Love You to save $5 off on any orders of $5 or more. This offer is valid through April 15th. So if you're planning to pick up anything or any supplies that I have linked in the description box below, definitely take advantage of that code and save a little extra. Now, the first product I'm seeing here is the Ranger Archival ink in the shade Black Soot. I usually reach out for my VersaFine Onyx Black ink when I'm stamping in black, but I'm really curious to give this one a try and see how it compares. Next, we have some thin foam squares. Now, this is an absolute must have in my crafty stash. I love adding dimension to my cards, my focal points, even my little sentiment strips, but I don't always want a lot of bulk. These thinner foam squares are perfect because they give just the right lift without making the card too thick. Next, we have these really cool Tim Holtz cello tapes. Now, these are little strips of decorative tape, almost translucent, that have that aged vintagey look on them, almost like old paper or worn out labels. I've actually never used them before, so I'm really excited to experiment with them, and I think they'll add such a fun layered mixed media feel to the projects. Now, they have a sticky backing, so I'm hoping I could even use it on my sentiment strips as well to create that beautiful vintagey look. Now, the next product that I'm going to share is one that I'm most excited about because this is exactly what we will be using to create our cards today. It's called the Artful Palette Stencil Set, and well, there are 5 stencils included in this pack. And these are specifically designed to help you build layout designs for your A2 sized panels. Now, I absolutely love products that take the guesswork out of the design, especially when you're trying to mass produce cards, just like we will be doing today. And what makes this even better is that they come with coordinating dies, which I'll be showing you in a minute. Now you see here there are 5 different layouts and these fit perfectly on your A2 size card fronts. Now I usually create A2 size cards with card fronts that are slightly smaller, which measure 4 by 5 and quarter, but I will be showing you how to use them on those smaller sized panels as well. Now, each of these stencils has numbered sections. Each of those windows have numbers on them. Now, and those numbers, they coordinate directly with the matching dies that is included in the kit. So once you ink blend or create your design using the stencils, you can line up these corresponding dies and cut everything out perfectly. It's such a smart and thoughtful system. Now, since this kit is sold out or out of stock, but these coordinating products are still available and can be bought either together as a combination or separately. Now, here's the coordinating die set that I was talking about. And this is the Artful Palette die set. It includes 18 dies, which not only cuts out those numbered sections from the stencil templates, but also includes some additional shapes like circles, hearts, and the cutest little butterflies. Now, this is something I personally absolutely love. It almost feels like a mini variety pack of nesting dies, which if you know me, you know I always reach out for. You're getting rectangles, squares, circles, hearts, and butterflies all in one set. I honestly feel like this is one of those super practical go to die sets that's incredibly handy to have in your stash. Even if the kit was sold out, this is one set that I would have happily purchased on its own. Now, if you take a closer look, the numbers are etched on each of those dies. We have those rounded squares and the rounded rectangles, so you can line them up easily. They match perfectly with the numbers labeled on the stencil. When you match the numbers on the dies with the numbers on the stencil, they fit perfectly within the cutout areas. It's almost like putting together a puzzle piece. Everything lines up exactly the way it's supposed to be. Now, since there are quite a few number of dies in the set, I went ahead and added a magnetic sheet to the back of the packaging. That way I know that all the dies, they stay securely in place and I don't risk losing any of those tiny little pieces. This is just a magnetic sheet I picked up from Amazon and I'll be sure to leave a link to it down in the description box below. Next, we have the Be Your Beautiful Self stamp set, and it's filled with absolutely thoughtful and encouraging sentiments. Now, these are perfect for encouragement cards, art journaling, mixed media projects, and even scrapbooking. I decided to use one of my favorite techniques with this set, creating almost a story like effect using just sentiments on my card fronts. Now, you can absolutely use one powerful sentiment from this as your main focal point, but I love mixing and matching a few of them together to build a layered, uplifting message. Now, one of my favorite sentiments in this set is believe you can and you're halfway there. I think that is such a strong and empowering sentiment. There are also some solid images included in the set which coordinate perfectly with the stencils and the dies. You can use them for stamping or even heat embossing your sentiments, which makes it really easy to create dimension and layered look on your card fronts. There are coordinating dies available which cut out not just those solid images but also all the sentiments on the set. Now, moving on to the pattern papers included in the kit, this is the Tim Holtz Ideology Curated Palette Collection. Now, here you have 12 double sided sheets, and these are larger sheets. These measure 8 by 8 inch, which I love because you can get so many card fronts just out of one sheet. The color palette is absolutely gorgeous, lots of warm oranges, reds paired with beautiful vintage style patterns. Now, if you are into distressed vintage crafting look, I would say this is definitely a must have in your stash. I personally love every single design in this pack, and I can already see myself using them as full card backgrounds, trimming out small focal point elements from the busier patterns, or even cutting thin strips to add layered accents on my cuts. And of course, we can also use the die cut pieces from these pattern papers using our artful palette dies that was in the kit to create those structured layout style designs. There are so many possibilities with this paper pack alone. I would really love to know how you would use these busier pattern papers. Would you go bold and use them as full card backgrounds, or would you cut them down into smaller elements? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and I always love hearing your ideas. And finally, let's take a look at the cardstocks included in the kit. We have some really fun options here. Metallic papers from the Tim Holtz Ideology line. We have this beautiful pearlescent black and a gorgeous rose gold, both perfect for adding touch of shine and elegance to your projects. You'll also receive the Simon's Stamp Ivory cardstock, a sheet of Nina Desert Storm, one thick sheet of vellum, and what I believe is that light pink cotton candy cardstock. We also have two envelopes, one in this bright, cheerful dandelion yellow, and one is the classic white, perfect for matching your cards and adding that finishing touch before sending them out. So that's a look at everything included in the kit. As I mentioned, the kit is sold out, but the great news is that all of these products can be purchased individually. I'll make sure to leave links to everything down in the description box below. I'd love to hear from you which of these products is your favorite. And well, don't forget, if you're picking anything up, use the coupon code We Love You to save that $5 off on orders of $5 or more. Normally, I'd wrap up my unboxing video here, but since this kit arrived a bit late and I was just so eager to get started, I couldn't wait any longer, especially to try out those stencils. I have never really done a layout style design before, so I was itching to give it a go as soon as I opened the kit. Now, for the cards we are making today, we will be using the stencils along with the stamp set. Now, we'll start by selecting two stencils from the set of five and layering them to create a beautiful dimensional layout. While I was layering, I decided to experiment with some of my favorite color combinations. It's the perfect way to make the design pop. Now, this approach is absolutely ideal if you're short on time and want to mass produce cards. The layout is simple, the colors are beautiful, and the stamped sentiments add that finishing touch. That's it. Simple, quick, and gorgeous cards every time. Now, because the basic dimension of these stencils are the same, it's really easy to layer them over one another. And like I mentioned earlier, this is a super simple technique. You don't even have to worry about things lining up or lining the stencils perfectly because the work is basically being done for you. Honestly, the part that took me the longest wasn't the stamping or the ink blending, it was deciding the color combination for my cards and choosing the sentiments to create our story like effect on the card fronts. To get started, I set my panel, which measures 4 by 5 and quarter inches, on my ultra sticky mat. When I place the stencil over the panel, you'll notice there's a slight border all around the edges, and the stencil does stick to the ultra sticky mat on its own, but I wanted to be extra careful. So I went ahead and added a little washi tape on either side of the stencil to hold everything in place while I ink blend. Well, my obsession for orange and pink started in early 2025, and honestly, I don't see that changing anytime soon. So, this was the first color combination I knew I wanted to try. I grabbed watermelon and sherbet from my positively saturated ink collection and started with that gorgeous vibrant orange on layer number one. Now, when I say simple ink blending, I really mean it. Here, there's no fancy technique. It's just about making sure that all the open spaces are covered with ink and, most importantly, the stencil does not shift. So you end up with a crisp, clean ink blended image on your panel. Once I finished ink blending the orange, I gently peeled the stencil off the ultra sticky mat and set it aside. I just love how vibrant that orange turned out. Next, I bought in stencil number 2 and carefully aligned it right on top of the ink blended panel. Well, you can use any of those stencil combinations, the results would be absolutely stunning. Now, I repeated the same exact ink blending process with my pink shade as well. Don't forget to use your washi tape just to make sure that while you're ink blending, the stencil does not shift. Now you will notice that some areas show that distinct pink and orange color, while there are areas where the colors overlap. They create this beautiful seamless blend. I think that mix adds so much more vibrancy and charm to the panel. It's exactly the kind of dynamic layered look that I was going for. You could even add some sparkle or some splatters to this, but I decided that this overlapping will be the highlight of our cards today. Once I was happy with the layering on the first panel, I carefully removed it from my ultra sticky mat and moved on to create panel number 2. Now for this one, I chose my next favorite color combination, which is pink and purple. I kept the pink stencil in place for the base layer and then bought in a third stencil to add the purple layer on top, creating another beautifully layered, vibrant panel. Now, both of these panels I created today are really bright and vibrant, with the focus mostly on the colors and the layered layouts. Of course, you could absolutely go for softer or gentler blends or lighter shades. It all depends on the mood you want for your cards. But since I was planning on making encouragement cards, I really wanted the colors to be bold and lively to match that uplifting theme. I'd love to hear from you. What are your favorite color combinations? Let me know in the comments down below. Now, if I were making a few more of these cards, I'd probably try maybe orange and yellow, blue and teal, or maybe even green and yellow. I'd like to hear from you what combinations you would pick. After I was done ink blending, I set both the panels aside. Well, it was at this point I was kind of deciding whether I wanted to add some splatters or keep these cut fronts as is. You could definitely add some beautiful splatters to these card fronts. Black would be striking, and I think gold splatters would look amazing too. But I decided to leave them as they are. Adding splatters might distract from the sentiments, which will be the stars of the show as we create a story like effect on these beautiful layered tile backgrounds. I created two layouts today, one horizontal, one vertical. For both the cards, I mixed and matched three sentiments from the stamp set to create that story-like effect we talked about earlier. I placed the panel onto my stamp wheel, and for the first card, I stamped the sentiments that read together: do what you love, believe you can, and you're halfway there. Hold on to your dreams. I really love how these sentiments flow together. They create a phrase that's uplifting, encouraging, and visually beautiful on the card front. I stamped everything using VersaFine Onyx black ink. I stamped it twice to get that crisp, bold impression that really stands out against the bright, layered background. For card number 2, I combined three different sentiments from the set, and together they read: be your beautiful self, the world needs who you were meant to be, start each day with a grateful heart. I absolutely love how thoughtful this phrase feels when the sentiments are read together. What's even more fun is that each sentiment uses a different font, yet they all tie together beautifully on the card front. It gives the design a playful, dynamic look while still keeping everything cohesive and harmonious. We are almost done with our cards, but I wanted to add a few finishing touches to make them really special. I die cut three butterflies from our die set using plain white cardstock. Now, these add a subtle, delicate charm to balance the otherwise vibrant panels. Now, one design trick I always like to follow is, whether it's sentiments, focal points, or even sequences, is to stick to odd numbers. That's why you'll see we have three sentiments and three butterflies. I feel odd numbers naturally draw the eye and create a pleasing flow, making the card front feel balanced and visually engaging. I used the tiny foam squares included in the kit to add some dimension to each of those butterflies and position them strategically in the empty spaces of the card front. This helps give the design a very balanced and harmonious look. Once I adhered all of the butterflies in place, I bought in my glitter brush pen to add a subtle shine to all of these butterflies. Well, of course, if you prefer to keep them plain white, that works beautifully too. Now, the glitter brush pen works well. One thing that I wouldn't recommend is using glitter cardstocks here for the butterflies. Now, that's because it could pull too much attention towards the butterflies instead of the rest of the design. Now, these are just some of the small design tricks that I like to use in my projects. Little details that help highlight the main elements on the card while keeping the overall design cohesive and visually appealing. For my card bases, I chose a beautiful purple and orange cardstock to coordinate with the colors on our card fronts. And of course, I couldn't resist adding a little bling to these cards. I pulled out some of my positively dazzling gems. We have some beautiful black gems for the orange and pink card and sparkly prism gems for the pink and purple card. I adhered them with liquid glue, placing them on either side of the sentiments, diagonally opposite from each other. This simple trick helps guide the eyes across the card, drawing attention to each element and giving the design a nice balanced flow. And there you have it. Two beautiful, vibrant cards created using the Simon Stamp February card kit. I absolutely love working with this kit, from the stencils and the dies to the pattern papers, cardstocks, and stamps. Everything is so thoughtfully curated and versatile. These cards really showcase how you can use products from one kit to create multiple layouts, telling a story through your sentiments and your color choices. Now, if you enjoyed seeing these cards, be sure to check out my playlist where I have created cards using contents from the Simon Stamp kits. It's full of inspiration and ideas to help you get most out of your own kits and create stunning layered designs. Now, I will definitely leave links to all the supplies that are available in the kit and all the colors that I use to create these card projects. Please note that all of these links are affiliate links, and if you shop using one of my links, I'll get a small commission. Thank you again for joining me today. Until next time, stay safe. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the All-to-New ACP Educator Hop, where the theme of today's project is creative accents, where I'll be sharing all the fun finishing touches that truly bring our projects to life. In the world of card making, we are usually told to start with the stamp, pick your inks, and then at the very last minute, hunt for the perfect embellishment to match. But today we are flipping the entire process on its head. Today I'm mass producing these sleek monochromatic cards, but with a twist that might completely change how you use your stash. Instead of embellishments being the final touch, they are actually the starting point of our projects today. We are choosing our gems first and letting them dictate our ink blends, layouts, and the overall design flow. This simple shift makes color matching effortless, but make sure you stick around until the very end because I'm sharing one embellishment mistake that can instantly ruin an otherwise beautiful card and how to avoid it every single time. Hi, I'm Revati, and welcome to my channel where it's all about fun, color, and lots of sparkle. If you've been following my work, you already know how much I truly love my embellishments, and today I'm reaching out for those absolutely gorgeous enamel dots by Altenew. They coordinate perfectly with the fun, vibrant colors that I'll be using in my cards, making them the perfect accent for your paper crafting projects, whether it's cards or even scrapbook pages. One of the things I love the most about these Altenew enamel dots is the variety. Each pack includes multiple shades within the same color family, which makes color matching incredibly easy and super versatile. And if you look closely, you will also find sweet little hearts and stars mixed in with the classic round dots, adding just the right amount of interest and charm to your projects. I'll be using four shades from this collection today. We have the Green Meadow, Cherry Blossom, that gorgeous soft pink, Glacier Coves, and the final Tea Party, which is a beautiful mix of pinks, reds, and peachy tones. Now that the star of our project is ready, it's time to choose the main focal point and the sentiment for our cards. I'll be using products from the Craft Your Life Project Kit Arched Foliage Collection. Now, before I show you the kit, I should give a special mention to this absolutely gorgeous storage pouch by Altenew, which stores all of these contents of the kit absolutely beautifully. Now, the set includes a gorgeous stamp which features that beautifully illustrated arch branch adorned with those lush leaves. It's perfect for framing sentiments, building serene scenes, or adding a touch of natural elegance to any card design. Now, it also includes coordinating products like stencils, 3D embossing folders for creating a stunning textured background, and coordinating die sets. I absolutely love the detailing on this element on all the leaves, and just take a look at the font on those beautiful sentiments. There is also coordinating dies that cut out not only that big arched image but also the bold sentiments that you see here on the stamp set. I also have the Arched Foliage 3D embossing folder, which brings out all those delicate details you see here on the stamped image. And it coordinates beautifully with the stencils as well, making it incredibly easy to build layered and cohesive designs. Not only do you get that big bold sentiments in the set, but the smaller sub sentiments are just as beautiful and meaningful. They are incredibly versatile, and you can pair them with the larger sentiments on the front of your card or even use them on their own on the insides of your card. For our monochromatic card designs today, I'll be keeping things simple and using just a stamp and the stencil combo. I'll start by placing the large arched foliage stamp onto my stamp platform. You can really see just how big the image is. It barely fits on my regular stamp wheel. Now, this is a smaller version, but Altenew does have the Stamp Wheel 2.0, which is much larger and would fit this image perfectly. Now, once I had the positioning just right, I layered my cardstock panel in the center of the platform and I held both the stamp and the paper in place and then pressed everything into the ultra sticky mat, making sure that my panel stayed perfectly aligned with the stamp and I was happy with the positioning. The panel measures 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches, which is the standard size of an A2 size card base. You'll notice that I have placed this panel diagonally on my stamp wheel since I'll be mass producing cards using the exact same layout. I want to make sure that every panel I position after this one is in the same spot each time. The stamp wheel does come with center alignment guides, which is super helpful when you are placing your cardstock either vertically or horizontally on your sticky mat. But because my panel is positioned diagonally, I'm using this little quick fix or a little workaround. I simply place small pieces of washi tape along the four corners of the panel. This creates a guide so when I add my second panel and every panel after that, I know exactly where to place it to get that perfect aligned stamping every single time. Since this was the very first time I'm using the stamp, I made sure to run my fingers lightly across the entire surface to remove any of that initial stickiness. This helps the stamp release more easily and give you much cleaner impression. Next, I ran my anti-static powder tool over the panel and then stamped the image using black pigment ink because we will be heat embossing this with clear embossing powder. You could absolutely leave it as a regular stamped image, but I personally love the subtle shine that the embossing powder adds. Now, I did stamp the image twice to make sure that I got a crisp impression. Now, since I'm mass producing these cards, I like to work in batches. So first I stamp all of the images and you will see that the washi tape guide made the placement of these panels so easy. Once I've stamped all of my images, I will then add embossing powder to each of those panels and finally heat set everything together. The black pigment ink stays wet for quite a while, so you don't have to worry about it drying out before you add your embossing powder. The extra open time makes it perfect for heat embossing, especially when you're working with larger images like this one. I'm using clear embossing powder by Altenew, which adds a beautiful glossy finish while still allowing the stamped details to shine through. Now, when it comes to heat embossing, this image, since it covers almost 3/4 of the panel, I want to be a little extra mindful. I make sure that my heat gun is fully heated before bringing it to the panel and then I keep it moving continuously across the image rather than concentrating the heat in one spot. This helps the embossing powder melt evenly and most importantly, it prevents the cardstock from warping. You can definitely expect a little bit of warping when heat embossing larger panels, and that's completely normal. A quick and easy fix is to let your panels cool down for a minute or so and then place them under a heavy pile of books or even under your die cutting plates. That gentle pressure helps flatten the panels out back and keeps them nice and smooth, ready for the next step in your card making process. Off camera, I went ahead and stamped my sentiment, which reads Hugs to You. I used the same black pigment ink, then sprinkled on some clear embossing powder and heat set it, just like we did with our main image. This gives the sentiment the same beautifully glossy finish that really makes it pop on the panel. Now it's time for the fun part, choosing our colors based on our enamel dots. I'll be using some gorgeous mini ink cubes by Altenew, which coordinate perfectly with the colors on my enamel dots. What I love most about these mini ink cubes is that each set comes with a variety of shades within the same color family. This makes it so much more easier to layer colors for depth and really brings out the dimension and details in your floral images or, well, basically any ink blending that you would want to do. I will start with those beautiful greens. Please note that I'll have links to all the colors and inks that I'm using for all my projects listed in the description box below so you can find them easily. Now, you could absolutely use alcohol markers to color in these beautiful leaves, but today I'm using the coordinating stencil instead. Now, this stencil comes in three parts. Two of them are designed to help add color to the leaves, and the third creates a subtle highlight on your background. Now, for today's project, we'll be using just the first two stencils to add those gorgeous layers of color to our leaves. One of the best things about coordinating products in this kit is how easily they layer over each element, whether it's the stamp with the stencil or the stamp with an embossing folder and the die cuts. I really love having products like these in my stash. They make crafting so much more simpler and more enjoyable. Now, even though the stencil is designed to line up perfectly with the stamped image, I noticed it doesn't match exactly across the whole panel. Now, well, this isn't a design flaw. Most likely, my paper warped slightly during the heat embossing, which caused that little shift. But don't worry, it's an easy fix. We can simply color in the leaves that match the etching on the stencil and cover any areas that appear to be misaligned using a small sticky note or any kind of masking tape. Plus, you can move the stencil around as needed to get that perfect placement. Now I'll be layering multiple shades of greens on my leaves to create a beautiful depth. I have light, medium, and dark shades, and I absolutely love the multi-tone effect it creates, adding dimension and life to our stamped images. You'll notice that once I finish ink blending on one part of the stamped image, I simply move my stencil and align the etching with the lower part of the stamp and then continue the same ink blending technique. I'm using the small ink blending brushes by Altenew, which are my absolute favorite to work with, especially in smaller areas like these. The bristles are soft and the brush is designed just perfectly. It's comfortable to hold and makes blending so smooth and effortless without any hand fatigue. This allows me to achieve seamless color transition and really brings out the stamped image to life. I went back and forth with my coloring, and I'll continue to do that until I'm completely satisfied with the blend and the intensity of color on each of those leaves. You could definitely use alcohol markers here, but since we are mass producing these cards, that process would take a little longer. Having coordinating stencil makes it such easier and quicker and still gives beautiful precise results. Now, once I finished coloring all those leaves, I gently peeled off the stencil and just look at that. The colors and the patterns it creates is absolutely stunning. Before moving on to stencil number two, I wanted to take a minute to show you how I clean my stencils, especially when I'm mass producing projects. I simply place my stencil on a microfiber cloth, spritz it lightly with water, and then swipe it clean with another microfiber cloth. It's quick, easy, and you don't have to run to the sink or wait for the stencil to dry. Now, this method works especially well if you clean your stencils right away, and it's a lifesaver when you're in a hurry or you're mass producing multiple cards at once. Once my stencil was clean, I set it aside and moved on to stencil number two. The process here is exactly the same as we did with the first stencil. This one simply colors the remaining leaves. I'm using the same colors and the same blending techniques as before, layering them carefully to keep the look consistent and vibrant across all the leaves. Take a look at how gorgeous this panel turned out. The stamped image adds such a beautiful texture to our focal point, and the ink blending using the coordinating stencils came out absolutely perfect. I just love how smooth and vibrant those colors are. Now I wanted to add some splatters to the card. Usually I'd go for black or gold splatters, but since we are creating monochromatic cards, I decided to use the same green inks from our blending to keep everything cohesive. The easiest way to do that is to tap your ink pad onto any glass or acrylic surface. I'm using my stamp block and I pressed the ink pad a couple of times to pick the color. Then I added a little water to let that ink flow and splattered it across the panel just like any usual splattering technique. Now, because these are green instead of black and it's not as pigmented as my black splatters, these splatters are slightly smaller and more subtle, giving just a delicate hint of texture. They might not show up as prominently on camera, but in person, they are really adding a stunning and elegant touch to our card. Off camera, I repeated the same exact process of ink blending and splattering on the remaining three panels, this time using some pretty pinks, soft blues, and that gorgeous shade of red. I absolutely love how these panels turned out. Those delicate splatters are so subtle yet stunning. They really enhance the texture of the embossed design, and the colors on the image just really pop beautifully. I then foam mounted each of those panels on top of top folding A2 size card bases, and now we are back where the whole project began. Those beautiful enamel dots. I'll start with my green card and use the green meadow enamel dots. I just love how gorgeous these shades are. They really complement the colors we used in the ink blending and that perfect finishing touch. I like to use a pointy tool to pick up these enamel dots. They already have a sticky backing, but I usually place them on the card first to figure out the perfect positioning before pressing them down firmly. Take a look at that gorgeous shine. You definitely don't need any extra glue with these dots, but I just love the way they catch the light and the shine is absolutely gorgeous. You could definitely stick to just one shade of the enamel dot, but since I used multiple shades from the same green color family in my ink blending, I decided to mix in different shades of the enamel dots as well. Now, when it comes to adding sequences or any kind of embellishments on my cards, I always like to place them in odd numbers and scatter them evenly above and below the sentiment. Now, this helps create a beautiful visual flow across the card. In some spots, I place the enamel dots in the white portions of the card front, while in others, I tucked them within the stamped and ink blended images. Now, if there was a die cut focal point, I would even tuck it under one of those die cut focal points. Now, these little finishing touches, whether enamel dots, sequences, or any other embellishments, guide the eye and bring balance to the design, which is what really adds to the magic of a handmade card. Even though adding these enamel dots is part of the finishing touches, I like to take my time to make sure that the placement looks just right. I want to get that visual satisfaction when I step back and look at a card. Once I'm happy with the arrangement, I press the dots down firmly so they stay in place. And don't forget the little heart. I chose one of those hearts and added it directly onto the sentiment. This is a great way to embellish your cards. You don't always have to scatter sequences across the entire panel. You can also focus them on your sentiment or any other focal point to draw the eye and add interest. Now, one common embellishment mistake that I sometimes make is overcrowding the card with too many embellishments. Well, it's easy to get excited and start adding sequences, enamel dots, glitter, or any other accents everywhere. But when there's too much going on, it can actually distract you from your focal point and make your card feel cluttered rather than polished. The easy way to avoid this is to plan your embellishment with purpose. Choose a few spots that naturally guide your eye, like around the sentiment or along the edges of your focal point image, and stick to odd numbers for that balanced, visual, appealing layout. Less really can be more, and this simple step keeps your card elegant while still giving that extra sparkle. And there you have it, our gorgeous monochromatic hugs to you cards. What started with those little enamel dots as inspiration turned out into beautifully layered textured card designs. These tiny accents may seem small, but they really tie the whole design together, guiding the eye and adding just the right amount of sparkle. This project is a great reminder that final touches matter. A well placed embellishment can elevate a card from pretty to stunning. Whether it's enamel dots, sequences, or other accents, taking the time to add them thoughtfully makes all the difference. I hope this inspires you to look at your embellishments in a new way. Don't miss out on the fun giveaway happening over at Altenew, and be sure to check out all the amazing inspirations from talented designers for this hobby. Now, all the supplies that I used to create these cards will be listed down in the description box below, along with the hop details, so you can easily follow along and try these projects yourself. Please note that all of these links are affiliate links, which means that if you shop using one of my links, I'll get a small commission at no cost to you guys. Thank you again for joining me today. Until next time, stay safe. Stop overcomplicating your themed cards. Today I'm sharing a bold pirate theme card using the brand new supplies by Cat Scrappiness. And it comes together in just minutes. The secret, keep it clean and simple without losing the fun. Hi everyone, I'm Revati and welcome to my crafting channel. Let's set sail. Let's take a closer look at everything that's included in this brand new pirate release by Cat Scrappiness. This collection features stamps and coordinating dies, perfectly matched pirate sentiments, and some absolutely gorgeous pattern papers that tie the whole theme together beautifully. We will be using all of these for our card today. Now, one of my favorites has to be this Pirate Quokka stamp set, which includes four absolutely adorable pirate characters, a fun little treasure chest filled with goodies, and a treasure map, maybe leading to the treasure island. A tiny flag with that spooky skeleton face, and what I like to call Mr. Krabby, complete with his own little sword. And the best part, there are coordinating dies that cut out every single image perfectly, even all those tiny little detailed elements, making it so easy to bring your pirate scene to life. Next up, we have the Pirate Sentiment stamp set, and I absolutely love the playful pirate phrases included in this one. From fun greetings like ahoy matey to it's a pirate thing and you are a treasure, plus so many more, these sentiments really bring the whole theme together. Now, what truly caught my attention is the font on these sentiments. It has that perfect pirate vibe, bold, adventurous, and slightly whimsical, and I feel it complements the entire release beautifully. Next, we have the Pirate Quokka 6 by 6 inch paper pack, and these are double sided papers, which makes them even more versatile. You get six different designs, and there are four sheets of each of those patterns. Now, let me just say the designs on these packs are absolutely stunning. My only complaint, if I even had one, is that they're double sided because choosing which side to use is honestly so hard. The first set of sheet features all of the stamped images from the release. I actually love keeping this one nearby as a coloring reference, but it would also make such a fun, bold background on its own. Behind that, we had that gorgeous distressed blue pattern paper with the light anchors. It was such a beautiful nautical feel. Then we had a darker design filled with those stamped images, creating an overall background paired with a rich wood grain pattern on the reverse. Then there's classic checkered patterns, waves and anchors, soft gray tones with pirate ships sailing through the waters, and more adorable pirate characters scattered across another set of sheets. And like we had the distressed blue anchor paper, we also have the similar version in red featuring the ship wheels. Plus, we have spooky skeletons, elements from the beachy waves patterns, and everything you require to create your pirate theme card projects or basically any pirate theme design that you love creating. Now, this paper pack truly makes building quick, cohesive cards so easy. Now, overall, these papers really complement the entire pirate release. The colors, the patterns, the characters all coordinate perfectly, making it so much more easier to create cohesive cards in no time. Now, off camera, I went ahead and stamped a few of those images and colored them using my Uhuhu alcohol markers. Nothing fancy here. I kept the coloring to the basics and I used those images on the pattern papers just as reference. And well, I did stamp my image using VersaFine Onyx black ink and heat embossed it and then colored it. That makes coloring so much more easier, and you'll see that the coordinating dies also cut out the images beautifully. Now, for my card today, I will be taking this little girl quokka pirate, and we will be using her as the main focal point of our card. Since the colors in my stamped images were quite dark, I wanted to choose a pattern paper that would really complement and enhance it. I knew I wanted a white card base to keep things bright and then layer on a gorgeous patterned background for some extra visual interest. I went through a bit of trial and error, testing out a few different background panels to see what would work best. At first, I considered using the papers that featured the stamped images from the set, but I realized that might make the card feel too busy and take the attention away from our main image. Instead, I focused on patterns that would balance the darker tones on the stamped image while still tying in the pirate theme. After a lot of back and forth, I finally decided on the wood grain sheet, and I feel it has a subtle texture and the rich tones that really make the characters pop. It will provide the perfect contrast and will ground the design and add just the right amount of visual interest without overwhelming our focal point. Now, this background choice really helped bring the whole card together and make it feel more cohesive and polished. Now, these panels are 6 by 6 inches, so for my card, I trimmed it down to 4 1 quarter by 5.5, which is standard A2 size card base. To ground my little pirate, I cut a white strip just over an inch tall, giving her a little base to stand on. That set up our basic design that I had in mind, and which was like clean, simple, and focused on the stamped image. The next step was picking a coordinating sentiment, and I chose one that would complement this clean and simple layout perfectly without taking away from the focal point image. Next, I stamped the sentiment that says "Thank you, matey," and decided to turn it into a fun dimensional speech bubble using one of Cat Scrappiness oval speech bubble dies. I love how just this small touch instantly transforms the card, which is our pirate theme design, and it becomes a playful thank you card in no time. To assemble everything together, I started by adhering the white strip onto the background panel using liquid glue. This anchors the design and gives the pirate a solid base to stand on. Then I went ahead and added little dimension by popping up our pirate focal point using small foam tape, which makes her really stand out from the background. After that was done, I positioned the sentiment speech bubble at a slight angle right next to our little pirate and secured it there with liquid glue. I feel it's that little angle at which we placed our sentiment gives the entire card a better visual appeal as compared to if I would have adhered it straight and aligned with the card base. I added some white highlights using my white gel pen, and just like that, the card came together beautifully, clean, simple, and full of whimsical pirate charm. It's a perfect example of how a few thoughtful layers and fun accents can turn a basic design into something really special. I hope you enjoyed watching today's video and got inspired to create your own pirate theme designs. Don't forget to check out my previous video where I created an interactive box card using the same exact products. I will have links to all the supplies that I used to create this card in the description box below. Please note that all of these links are affiliate links, which means that if you shop using one of my links, I'll get a small commission at no cost to you guys. Thank you again for joining me today. Until next time, stay safe. Think shaker cards are messy, bulky, and just not worth the effort? Give me the next few minutes to prove you wrong, because these tiny spring sprinkles are about to completely transform this Easter scene, and I'm sharing the exact trick to get that perfect shimmer and shake without all the bulk. Hippity hoppity, Easter is on its way. Hi friends, I'm Revati, and today we are bringing all the fresh spring vibes into our craft room with this charming Easter shaker window card. We are working with the sweetest little bunnies, soft spring colors, and a mix of texture that truly bring the scene to life. Let's get started. I'm starting off with these absolutely gorgeous little bunnies from the Hippity Hoppity Bunny stamp set. I mean, just look at how sweet those faces are. Now they are almost too cute to handle. Well, I went ahead and stamped three of them onto a piece of white cardstock and heat embossed them using clear embossing powder to give those outline a nice and crisp finish. That little bit of shine really helps everything keep neat and polished once we start coloring in. Now, here's something I always love doing is that I like to die cut my images before I color them in. That way, I don't risk any die cutting mishaps after spending all that time on that beautiful coloring. There's nothing worse than a perfectly colored image and then slightly off die cut, trust me. But I'm curious, what about you? Do you prefer to die cut first, or do you prefer to color and run everything together through your die cutting machine? Let me know in the comments. I love seeing how everyone's creative process is a little different. Normally, I would just place my die cuts onto a scrap piece of paper or directly onto my glass mat while coloring. But here's a little trick that is especially useful when you're working with smaller images like these. You can place them onto a temporary adhesive sheet or a tape, or do what I did here and stick them onto the sticky edge of a post it note. Now, that slight tackiness is just enough to hold your pieces in place while you color without tearing the paper when you lift them off. It keeps everything from sliding around and makes the whole process so much more easier. Now, for coloring, I kept things fairly simple and reached for my absolute favorite, my Uhuhu alcohol markers. I used a light shade of gray for the bunnies to keep them soft and sweet, and then brought in some bright, vibrant colors for the flowers, the balloons, and a cheerful pop of orange for the carrot. One thing I really love about these markers is that they have both brush tip and a fine tip. The brush tip is perfect for blending larger areas like the entire body of the bunny, but when it comes to those tiny little details like the bows on our bunnies, I switch to the fine tip to get in those little tiny spaces without going outside the lines. Now, simple coloring, bright spring colors, and just enough detail to make these cuties really stand out. To finish off the coloring, I added the tiniest little pink dots on each of those bunnies' little cheeks. And oh my goodness, that one small little detail made such a difference, and they look even more sweeter and full of personality. Well, towards the end, I just used two of these bunnies, and the bunny holding the balloon, I would probably put her on the inside of the card or use her for another project. Now, to begin creating the base of our ground, I used the Tuck It In add-on craft die. I used the hilly border and ran it through a strip of white cardstock to create that soft rolling hill look. To add a little more interest and dimension to our ground, I bought in one of the tiny carrots from the Carrot Fun die set. It is such a sweet detail and it really helps tie the whole scene together. Now, there are four sizes, but I chose the smallest one. Before adhering anything down, I used the tuck it in die to cut a small slit through that grassy hill. This creates a perfect little opening to tuck our carrot into it, almost like it's growing out right from the ground. Now, I love the interactive details like this because they make the scene feel more thoughtful and cohesive. And since we have that adorable bunny holding the carrot, this little element on the ground just brings everything together so beautifully. It's those small touches that really elevate the card from cute to extra special. I colored in the carrot using the same exact color combinations that I used for the carrot, which our little bunny is holding. Now, of course, you could absolutely cut your hill from craft cardstock or any solid shade of brown and call it done, but I personally love adding my own custom color. There's something about ink blending your own browns that gives the ground so much more life and character, I feel. Instead of keeping it perfectly smooth and even, I like to blend in a very splotchy, uneven way. I layer a few different shades of browns from my stash and just build up the color gradually. It doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, the more imperfect it looks, the more natural it feels. Little darker patches here and there almost mimic real soil and give the scene that organic, earthy texture. So don't stress about any kind of flawless blending. Just play around with the browns you already have, mix light and darker tones, and let it look a little messy. That's what makes it more realistic and adds so much more depth to your card. Now, since this is going to be a shaker card, the next step was to build our window frame. I die cut a frame from white cardstock to keep everything looking clean and crisp. Then I layered my ink blended hill right along the base of that frame using liquid glue. Once it was secure, I went ahead and trimmed off any excess cardstock hanging over the edges so that we could have a nice polished finish. Now here's how we are actually going to assemble the shaker. The hill is actually going to be sandwiched between our white frame and the acetate sheet. But instead of placing the hill behind the acetate, I wanted it sitting on top of the acetate layer simply because this is where we'll be tucking in our little carrot and adhering those die cut bunnies. By keeping those elements on top of the acetate, they stay nice and crisp and become part of the main focal point layer. Now, instead of getting visually lost behind all of those shaker bits. Now, the best part, all of that matte cardstock and the beautiful ink blended texture sitting on top of that clear, shiny acetate will create a beautiful contrast. Now, talking about the background, at first I was planning to create a soft blue ink blended sky with fluffy white clouds, which would have been beautiful, but at the very last minute, I decided to switch things up and use a pattern paper instead. This is the one from Will You Work for Craft Supplies paper pad. And honestly, I absolutely love this choice. The gorgeous blue shade paired with the subtle textured pattern makes the background feel extra special. Alright, now we are ready for the fun part, which is assembling the shaker window. I started by adding double-sided tape all along the edge of the frame. Since this frame is pretty thin, I prefer using double-sided tape instead of liquid glue. The last thing we want is any of that glue seeping out and showing through our acetate. That would totally ruin that clean and polished look of our card. Once the acetate window was secured, I flipped the panel over and added foam tape all around the back to create that raised edge. This is what will give our shaker window dimension and allows those sprinkles to move freely inside our window. And here's a little design tip you'll notice. I added extra foam tape along the bottom, right behind the hill. That's intentional. If we don't reinforce that area, the sprinkles could slide down and get stuck behind the hill when the card is standing upright. By sealing that section off, we can make sure that the sprinkles stay visible and continue to shake beautifully in the open sky area. It's those tiny construction details that really make your shaker card feel professional and thoughtfully designed. To fill in the shaker window, I chose some of the most beautiful pastel toned sprinkle mixes to keep the soft springtime vibe. I'm using two of my favorites, the Hoppy Days Sprinkle and the Spring Fling Sprinkle. Both of these mixes are just dreamy. They have those gorgeous soft pastel colors and they even include tiny floral details that make the shaker so whimsical and perfect for Easter. Now, these little sprinkles really bring the scene to life, and when they move around inside the shaker, they just add the right amount of sparkle and motion without overwhelming our cute little bunnies and the hill on the foreground. Now, one little tip I want to give a special mention to is this. Before adding any of those sprinkles, I took a small paintbrush and lightly dabbed some anti-static powder all around the edges of the foam tape. This simple step helps prevent any of those tiny shaker bits from sticking to the edge of the foam tape so that they can move freely and don't get clumped or staticky. Once I did that, I removed the backing from the foam tape and then I added all of the shaker elements. Also, a little note on the shaker fill philosophy is that I don't want to load my shaker window with a ton of those beautiful sprinkle mix. I want the sprinkles to pop and move, but I also don't want them to overpower the background or steal attention from our focal point images. Keeping it just right ensures everything looks balanced, soft, and still keeps that whimsical Easter time vibe. Once I'm happy with the amount of shaker elements inside the window, it's time to close it up and seal it perfectly. I will press the edges firmly, which will ensure that the window is completely sealed so that none of those little sprinkles can escape through any gaps. Taking a moment here to press evenly also helps keep the foam tape snug against the acetate, which gives a clean professional finish and keeps the shaker elements moving smoothly inside our window. Next, we can start assembling all of those little colored and die cut images. I start by tucking in our little carrot inside that little gap on the hill. Now, I did use liquid glue here, which will make sure that the carrot stays in place. Then I added the bunny with the carrot and followed by the bunny with a little flower. Since our shaker card already has so much dimension, I decided to adhere all of those elements using liquid glue. It gives a strong hold without adding any extra bulk, so everything stays perfectly in place. For our sentiment, I chose the Hippity Hoppity sentiment stamp. I stamped the sentiment that says, Hippity Hoppity, Easter is on its way, onto a piece of white cardstock and heat embossed it with clear embossing powder to give it that crisp raised finish, also matching the stamping and heat embossing on the little bunnies. Once my sentiment was ready, I trimmed it into a neat sentiment strip and placed it right in the center of our frame. And just like that, the main structure of our card is complete. Once that was done, adding the tiny little finishing touches and little details was all that's remaining. That'll bring our card front to life and will give it a more polished Easter like feel. To finish things off, I added a few tiny brown dots on the hill to give a little extra texture and make it feel more natural. Just those small details really help the scene come alive. For the bunnies and the carrots, I added highlights using my white gel pen. Now, if this were a flat card and not an interactive shaker card, I would definitely add some sparkle with a glitter brush pen. But since we already have those beautiful sprinkles in the background and a shiny acetate window, I decided to skip the glitter and keep it simple with just the white highlights. And with those little finishing touches, our charming Easter shaker card is officially complete. It's playful, springy, and full of movement, a perfect little scene to celebrate the season. I hope you enjoyed watching today's video and got inspired to create your little Easter scene. I will leave the links to all the supplies that I used to create this card in the description box below. Please note that all of those links are affiliate links, which means that if you shop using one of my links, I'll get a small commission at no cost to you guys. Thank you again for joining me today. Until next time, stay safe.